present demonstration.
Record it. Oh, can you hear me? Brilliant. Right. What I'm going to do today is make a couple of things from bits of log. Now, we all get logs like this of pretty woods like laburnum and yew and things like that, which are nice colours, gorgeous colours inside, but we don't ever really have anything to use them for other than little things. Now, I'm going to make a biggish bowl, about sort of 12 inches in diameter from this log. Just to show you what I've done first, I've got 2 bits of wood, and I would highly recommend you do it like this rather than doing it manually. I screw the 2 bits of wood onto the log, and then when I pass it through the bandsaw to get it split down the middle, I'm not trying to hold the log with my fingers. The 2 blocks of wood are holding it in place. Once it's split, the 2 halves, I'm going to take 1 half, and what I've done to make my life a little bit easier is I've planed it. So it's completely flat. You don't have to, it just makes life a little easier if it is completely flat. And then I don't have to finish it or worry about finishing it afterwards.
Lost sound. Mitchell is muted.
Exactly where the center is. I'm going to make a little dent where that center is. So that's going to be the center of my bowl. And I'm going to drill that for the chuck. A little bit deeper. Fraction deeper. That should do. Right, so that's deep enough for that. And I'm going to literally screw this straight onto the chuck on the lathe. Now, you are limited by what you've got over the bed. Fortunately, this lathe has got a fair bit of capacity, so I shouldn't be too worried. I gather I'm on Zoom as well. Is I'm going to turn the outside shape down to produce a little bit of a bowl in there, but I'm going to leave these big wings. It really is a question when we're turning with something like this that you work on the principle that everything this side of the tool rest is safe. Are you okay? My mask keeps slipping down. This side of the tool rest, we're safe. This side of the tool rest, you keep your fingers well and truly clear. Otherwise, you won't have them for that long. So making sure it goes round. That looks fairly good. Just like an old aircraft propeller. Right. Using a little ball gouge. Actually, that's not. I'm going to cut that middle. Yeah. I'm going to cut towards the center. You'll see once I've taken a couple of cuts where I'm cutting away. Now, as you can see, there is an awful lot of very fast-moving wood And although this doesn't look like a very big roll, it's about sort of 14, 15 inches in diameter. So it's quite a large diameter piece of wood spinning round. And although it's only doing about 1,200 odd revs, it's actually potentially about 120 miles an hour on the outside edge if you catch your fingers in it, which is not so nice. So what I'm doing is I'm gradually taking this down, and I'm going to take this down, leaving a solid in the middle until I've got it about 4 or 5 mil thick up here. I'm going to move the tool rest in a bit, but do remember, although I say very facetiously when I'm turning normally, don't forget to turn the lathe off before you move the tool rest, and I don't usually bother. This is one of those situations where I really do bother. Right. You want a fairly substantial hardwood to do this. I have done it with box, I've done it with sycamore, I've done it with yew, and that's all worked. I tried it with silver birch, but it's a little bit too soft and tends to tear out on the far side because you're working effectively with cut and then a huge amount of free air, then cut. And it's that gap, the tool moves a fraction, and softer woods, it tends to cut in too far the far side. Now, it may seem like I'm turning this really quite fast. The slower you turn it, the more chance there is that the tool will sink into the gap. So as it's turning, you've got to go from there all the way around to there without the tool dripping in a bit, because if it goes in a little bit, you catch it the far side, and it'll tend to take your edge, your beautiful crisp edge down a little bit if you're not careful. I'll just move the tool rest in a little bit more.
Now it's time for visit to the nurse. Detailed checks.
To see if it's even, but when I'm actually turning, I always take my head out of the way so that I'm out of the line of fire if something goes wrong. And you're trying to get this edge as even as possible. Do you
encourage everybody else to be out of the way as well?
Nope. It's only wood shavings. That's good. You haven't got a bit of gaffer, have you? Gaffer. Huh? Gaffer tape. Any tape, just a tiny. No, it's cut my finger. Does this tear?
Yeah.
I normally have a little leather glove. It's getting my finger. I'm a wimp. Now, taking advantage of moving the tool rest in again. Now, the reason I was very, very careful to plane this flat is so that this is even when I've turned it. If you don't get it absolutely flat and you have a slight curve in it, if you're not careful, you'll end up having to turn both sides. And I really don't want to have to do that, but I don't have to. So by getting it 100% flat, it saved me having to turn both sides. I'm only going to be turning this side. At least I'm not turning you. It makes the coffee taste foul. Now, I don't know if you can start to see where I'm starting to get the bowl is going to be in here. So getting there, not quite as thin as I want it yet. Cut my finger a bit more. There we go. Now, in an ideal world, when you're turning something like this, what you really want is the light source only from one side, and you don't really want a light source from the other side, so you can see the silhouette more easily. What I'm looking at as I'm turning is the little ridge that I've created, and I'm watching that come down. About halfway, I think. Oops. Sorry, the tool rest is moving fractionally. Doesn't matter so much about the absolute end, because to be honest, we're going to lose about 1/4 of an inch, maybe or so off the end anyway, so that's not critical. It doesn't help if the tool rest moves. Now I'm going to take a little bit of this going the other way. Absolutely. That's about right. I'm going to check this before I go too much further, because as you obviously realize, the further you get into here, the thinner this gets, the more this is going to flex. So I've got a little bit more leeway on this side, but not a huge amount. So actually, there's one thing you can't turn with, and that's a blunt tool. And as I always say, the only cut that counts is the last one. Everything else is just getting rid of wood. So the only time you need a razor sharp tool is the very last cut. So it's always worth thinking about sharpening your tool just before you take that very last cut. Almost there. A little bit thick. A little bit thick at the bottom. Right. Let's go a slightly smaller gouge. Right. I've now got the wing pretty well finished. I'm going to change the tool rest because this tool rest is going to be a bit long. Yep. %90 on the tool rest, maybe 95. Very little pressure on the wood. The more pressure you put on the wood, the more likely you are to actually cause some damage. So very little pressure on the wood. Actually, that doesn't fit. Ooh, that doesn't fit. Mind. No, that's full of shavings. I'm trying to get the tool rest as close as I can without getting it in the way of the wing, which is why I really want a short tool rest. Unfortunately, that shorter one, the arm is too long. It won't sit low enough. Right. tool rest is vibrating. The further you get away from the end of the tool rest, the more potentially the tool rest will move. I'm trying to get the tool rest as close as I can and still get a support, which is why generally something like this, where I'm working that close in, a shorter tool rest would actually be better because you're supporting nearer to the edge of the middle of the tool rest. Right. I'm going to cut that last little bit in. Now, by this point, you want to actually be in solid wood when you get to that joint, which I think I am just. Right, so this is where my bowl is going to sit into the, effectively what you might call the log. The shape is not perfect, so I'm going to give that a little bit more of a shape with a curve. Where it joins at this point, you don't want it to be vertical, because then you'll end up with a lot of extra rim. You want to be almost vertical, because the rest of it goes inside, the rest of the curve goes on inside the wood. Does that make sense? Need me whiteboard. I'm going to take a little bit off the bottom because it's a little bit top heavy. I'm getting a perfectionist about the shape. I want it to be absolutely right. Otherwise, if it's the general public I'm showing things, they don't really care whether it's perfect. You show wood turners, and if it's not right, they will very soon tell you. Far too critical, wood turners. Lovely. So that is the basic shape of my bowl. So I've got my bowl on there. That's the outside of my bowl. There's no chucking recess or anything like that. I'm going to sand it a little, but a lot of this you can sand out of the lathe afterwards. But I'll show you how I would sand it to give you an idea. Sandpaper. Oh, I didn't show you a trick. Jumping back, when I drilled the hole, I didn't use it with this, I did it by eye, but if you want to drill and you want to get your drill absolutely 100% straight, if you get, this is actually the inside of a hard drive. If you put that over where you're working, I don't know, can you see with your camera? Can you see how, as I move it, I can see exactly in the reflection? Does that show? You need the one at the angle, this one. If I lift it up. Can you see, as I move, you can see in the reflection when it's straight. So when it's absolutely straight, you move your head round a little, you can see exactly when it's level, so that you keep your drill absolutely perfect. Sorry, just wanted to show you that because I meant to show you that earlier, and that's why I had that bit of wood there, bit of metal. And that's the inside of a hard drive. It works with an old CD or something, but a nice mirrored surface. Right. Very briefly, I'm going to sand this. No, I'm not. I'm going to sand this. Now, if you're going to sand this, reasonably, you want to do it by hand. Now, if you just hold your hands in there like that, you're incredibly vulnerable. So I'm using the tool rest to support one of my hands. My other hand literally will hold in there. So I'm using the tool rest to support my arm, my left arm, and my right arm will hold the sandpaper. And then I can actually sand it without having to particularly worry about risking my fingers going into the curve of it. Now I'm going to sand by hand a little bit of the flat surface here, but not very much of it. Most of my sanding on that will be done when it's actually stationary. I'm not going to sand any of the exposed wing as it spins. And be very aware that you've got effectively a propeller blade running at about 120 miles an hour on the outside edge with a very sharp edge. Right, I'm just gone 120, 180, 240, and this is 320. Not really going to go much finer than that. There. So that's the bowl effectively sanded. The last bit up here is very easy. I'm going to sand that under power. But I'm not going to do that with the wood moving, literally just with the drill. And I won't do it all, just to show you. And I'll do it like just to give you an idea of what it looks like. Right, so assuming I'd gone through the grades with that, completely sanded that, what I'll now do is turn it round. So You'll notice there's no chucking spigot. What time do you break for tea, by the way? 8:30. Perfect. There we go. So I've got my finished bowl. I just need to hollow out the middle. Now, I'm going to take this chuck off. Where's it go? Yes, you're right. Now I've done it too tight, haven't I? Right. Where are we? There we are. I have here a block of wood that I have pre-turned. There's a dovetail spigot at the bottom and a hollow in the middle. Now I'm going to put my chuck onto lathe. And I'm going to hold that on these jaws. So that is held on the jaws. And I've got two little nuts, one at each end. I'm going to undo first. This is where it's very useful that your center lines up perfectly. And just as a warning, people who have swivel head lathes, make sure you've lined up the centers and got them absolutely accurate before you get to this stage. Otherwise, you'll never get it quite in the right place. So, put my center in, and I'm going to put my bowl up against there and hold it in place with the center. Now, obviously, I can't really turn with that in place. So what I'm going to now do is drill through from the other side. That's centered-ish. And eventually, I'm going to take a saw cut there and a saw cut there to take off that end. So whatever I do to the very end doesn't really matter. Now, there are two little strips of leather just inside, underneath here and underneath here. You can have a look in the brake to see exactly where those are. And I didn't get the drill bit out first, which I probably should have done. The leather is because that's what's supporting it on. It's not, I've not got my finished surface straight against the wood. It's straight against the leather. And I want a 6mm drill bit. What's the betting? I haven't got a 6mm. There. Right. It's all supported with the tailstock, so to be honest, I don't need to do particularly much in the way of holding it at the moment, but when I take the tailstock away, nothing's going to hold it in place. My bolts will be the only thing holding it. So do I get the feeling this drill bit is blunt? No, it's not going backwards. I had thought of that one. Right. So I'm now going to put these bolts back in. It's my drill bit is blunt. I can smell the burning. Now the reason the leather's there, because when I tighten the nut up, it needs something to sort of hold it on against to keep it, so it's just slightly further away from the jig. I'll get there. I'll get there. There we go. Don't do it with the wing nut this side. Make sure you've got the wing nut the safe side. Right. That'll do. And ditto on the other side. Now, sorry about the noise. There we go. You may notice there's a number of other holes on the back of this jig, so that if I'm using smaller pieces, I get slightly closer in. Ah, yeah. That was a bad mistake. I apologize. I've just realized I've forgotten to do something. Quite important something. I will show you very quickly. You need to measure the thickness of the bowl before you start turning, otherwise you won't be able to turn it, because you won't know how thick to make it. So with your calipers, before you put it in the jig, you want to measure how deep the bowl is. And it does make quite a difference if you don't do this. Yeah, which we don't want. We want a good couple of millimeters. So that's exactly 40 millimeters thick. So I can go 32 millimeters deep. Sorry, back to there. We can put the nuts back in. It is quite important that you do that before you put it into the jig, because once you've started turning, you can't feel the bit on the inside. Right. So, center out. Ooh, sorry, didn't mean to bang that. Is the stop on this? No. Right. We now have, sorry, our bowl. And again, you want to be very careful to keep the safe side of the tool rest. And make sure you've got 360 degrees of revolution first. Now that's purely being held in place by the those two bolts. And now it's just a very simple job of following. This is where you can't actually get your fingers in and feel how thick it is when you've turned it. See, you really need to know how deep it was before you start turning. Now, I know probably a lot of you use the traditional American swept back ridiculous grind that seems to abound in the world. Personally, all my bowl gouges are not ground down on the wings. It's what I call, Stuart calls it a 40-40 grind. He's about the only person that seems to use it nowadays. Everybody else has these long swept back grinds. I will pass around a couple of my gouges just to show you. One's 40 odd degrees, one's about 50, 55 degrees. And basically, the angle of the bevel is the same all the way round. So when the tool is against the wood and the bevel supported, wherever I twist it, the bevel stays in contact. When you've got a swept back grind, you know, when you sweep it back like that, like you do with the spindle gouge, the bevel angle is different there as it is on the side there. So if you twist the gouge, the bevel support moves. So what I like to do is to have a constant bevel that's the same all the way around. And I also grind the back of the bevel away very slightly as well. So when I sharpen the tools, I sharpen the bevel all the way around, then slide the tool up about a third, and a third again, just to take the very back of that bevel off. So the back of the bevel is removed. So I've got a soft transition on the inside of a curve. Does that make sense? Right. You can see how far I've got to go with that. I've got a little bit further to go. Very slow reacting machine. Because you'll see when I start the cut, can you see the bevel on that? The bevel is absolutely closed. As I get into the cut, once the cut started, I twist the tool so the bottom wing comes forward and it improves the quality of the cut. So I've got the wing open all the way around from this point. Need to go a bit deeper. This is where, if I was turning an ordinary bowl, just stick my fingers in and feel. Can't do that with this. So I've got quite a bit to go. And there is nothing worse than an uneven wall thickness. You want to keep it nice and even all the way around. Now, the reason when I started the outside curve, I didn't start it absolutely 90 degrees. I had it a little bit flush. You remember? So that when I get this inside curve, I don't have to go in a little bit before I start the curve. The curve can start fairly straight on. So it looks like a continuous curve on the inside. I remember I was at the shop a few weeks ago and a lady came in and bought one of these. And she said, "How do you get it stamped out like that?" But she was paying me 85 quid for the pleasure. I don't care. She could ask what she'd like, but I don't quite know if there's an easy way of doing it. I think this is probably the only way of doing it in solid wood. Oops. Gonna check. Ooh. Now, because I measured this on the outside, I know that that's exactly how thick it is. If I put that in there, I know that the gap here, when I look across, is how thick the bottom is. And if I didn't know that, the only other way of doing it is tapping it, crossing your fingers. Now, I'm losing a little bit of bevel contact at the bottom. You notice I passed around two gouges. One of them had a very short bevel. Sometimes with 40 degrees, it's difficult to get the bevel rubbing at the bottom on a bowl which is nice and even. So having a slightly shorter bevel, and you see the angle's going to be a little bit better, so I can still get it cutting at the bottom without it bouncing on the side of the bowl. This is where I'm going to go on to this one. That very slight vibration is because I've got the support for this bowl is there, and I'm about as far away from the support as possible. So there's always a very small amount of vibration if you're not careful. Now, oh, it's still a bit thick. Still a bit thick. We can't have it too thick. I've got wood turners who feel it and tell me it's clunky. But the other thing I recommend is you don't plunge the calipers in to check the depth while it's spinning. Still a bit on the thick side. Still a bit thick. Yeah, go a little bit more. You know, a little bit more is always too much. When you see daylight, you start to worry. Well, actually, you won't. It'll look darker. Go on, we'll leave it there. I'm not going to take a chance. Right. Now, we need to sand the inside of this. And again, the outside edge, we don't need to worry about because that's already been sanded because it's come straight off the planer. I might, when I take this off, go over this with sort of maybe 320 grit by hand when I'm doing the other side. But for the moment, I don't really need to worry about that at all. All I do need to worry about is that bit in the middle. And again, I'm still going to use this to support my hand. So my hand is supporting, my left hand is supporting my right hand as I sand. If you could do the honors. Blunt sandpaper. Uh, 180. 180. I have a horrible feeling there's a mark in there I got out. Yeah, there's a very slight mark. Does this have reverse? If I flick it the other way? Ah, you haven't got a lock on this bugger. No, no, I won't do that. Now it's not working. No, I haven't touched the speed. Don't turn it too fast. Did I not press the stop button? Well, I did press the stop button. Right. Almost ready for tea. Okay. Right. There we have a finished bowl. Now, what I would do, I won't do it. I could, but I won't do it. And do feel free to come and have a look and a feel. Out you come. Out you come. It will come out. It will come out. And there we have. Now I would, on the bandsaw at a later date, take one saw cut on each side to cut just below those holes. And I would cut it very, very roughly. I got on? Yes, I have. Very, very roughly where I put those pencil marks. But that is my finished bowl. Time for tea. Do come and have a feel. I'd go over it with Danish oil, 2 or 3 coats of Danish oil. Wipe it on, wipe it all off, leave it 24 hours, wipe it on, wipe it off, leave it 24 hours. The last coat I go over very roughly by hand with web racks before I put the last coat on. Do come and have a look. I can see it.
Please feel
can
free to
actually see
unmute
it on
yourself.
here. I can see the outside here.
If there's any questions you want, put them onto the chat page, and then we'll ask them at the end of the break time.
Well, no, because that, or unless I got it would only work if I got an absolutely perfect curve, which I'm not going to guarantee. It's much easier to. I'm still going to have to keep measuring. Were there any questions, Jenny?
Not at the moment, but we'll.
I don't know where you are.
We'll let you know.
Name badge draw.
We're all ready. Is it one of us?
Drum roll.
Trouble is, to put it.
Kate Dawkins. Kate Dawkins.
Kate is here with her name on.
Not yet.
On
I'm
the
here.
screen. Yeah,
Hi, yeah, I'm here.
and she's got Saw on her name.
Yes.
Saw Kate.
Hello, thank you very much.
Jolly good.
Well done, Kate.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much. I haven't won before.
Yeah, Kate, we'll get a tenner to you.
Thank you very much.
Drinks on you then, Kate.
Oh, sounds like it.
I'm doing it on the club now.
Notice you're sawless, Jenny.
Pardon?
You appear to be sawless.
Yes, I'm sawless today. That's because I had another meeting earlier on.
40.
Bill Brown, John.
Bill Brown, John. Okay, we'll
You're
contact
100
Bill.
club now.
And 97? 97.
Oh dear.
Harry Snelling. Right. Well, thank you very much for all your kind donations on that. Now we come to the presentations. A lot of you, the older members here, will remember Tom Purcell. Tom was a very kind member of the club, always working in the background, and at the end of the evening, he was always here helping put things back together, hide things away, clearing up. And very, very rarely did he actually stand up and make his presence known. But that was Tom. He was always here very quietly in the background, a long-standing member of the club who actively worked on behalf of the club. So there's a lot of things that we want to remember Tom for. Now, after Tom sadly left us, John Creasy and a couple of other people helped do a lot of the clearing up of Tom's both wood and tools, and those were donated to the club. And with that was a request that we had something to remember Tom by. So after a lot of thought, we decided that one group of turners that didn't get a lot of recognition in the trophies was the novices and the beginners. So what we decided was to award the Tom Purcell Trophy to the most improved beginner and novice, who had an individual who put several pieces in the competition and showed over a period of 2 or 3 years continuous improvement, not just in moving up from beginner to novice, but also in the quality of the work. And our first winner of that trophy is Tony Pitt. So Tony, if you'd like to come forward, and I'll get the if you'd like to give this to Tony. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. that piece of wood that Tony was referring to came from the stash of walnut that John Sherwood had. And so it's closing the cycle there, turned by one of our own turners from wood that belonged to the club.
Lemon or
Now,
strawberry?
one of the other things that when we were clearing out Tom's workshop was a wooden plane that he had.
Whoop.
And we said, rather than just try and sell it as an antique or let somebody else turn it into a lampstand, so let's see what we could do with it. So this is the plane. I don't know the history of the plane itself, but the blade was made by Isaac Sorby. And Isaac Sorby was making plane blades from 1825 to 1840. So I don't know that whether the block itself is as old as that. But one of the other interesting things is there's 3 strike lines and a diagonal across it. And very often tradesmen would have a mark that represented their work, which they carved or put onto the bits of wood that they'd done. But anyway, this is for you. Thank you. Yes, it is a heavy piece of wood, but I didn't choose a lampshade for it because the last thing I would do at home was choose a lampshade. I am not going to do the same thing for yourself. But thank you very much for that. And to everybody, please, let's give a thanks for Tom. Thank you. The last one that we got tonight, as he wasn't here last month, and this is the Turner of the Year. And Duncan? Goes down there. So Duncan had that wonderful piece, which was the tumbling block bowl. He talked us through how he made it on Zoom, and every one of us was astounded by the amount of work, the thinking, and the detail that went into it. And when we saw the final piece, the quality of it was absolutely stunning. So well done, Duncan.
Thanks very much indeed.
And a pleasure.
Cheers. Thank you.
That really does show that what you can actually do with little bits of wood, as well as the branch wood that we've got Greg working on. Over on the table there's a little 6-inch bowl. That started out as a 12-inch square plank. Now, before we get too complacent on that, there was a massive great crack down it, and it had cupped. But a friend of Roger Roger Hardwick bought 3 tree trunks from South America about 40 years, sorry, 6 tree trunks from South America about 40 years ago. And he had them planked, and they've been apparently sat in his garage ever since. We were tasked with turning some squares that were provided to us into memorable pieces. So there's that piece over there, and if you look at the back of it, you can find the tree number, and you can find the latitude and longitude in the middle of the bush of Guyana in South America. Its Latin name and its local name and its English name. So those are all sort of things that if you see FSC on a piece of wood, it's forestry certified timber, and it's obviously it started a long time ago in this this process. And if you get any CITES timber now, if you, for instance, any blackwood, that has to have a full trailer certification with it if you're selling it legally. It's nearly as tough now to work and sell that stuff as it is with ivory, and rightly so. So anyway, big thanks to Tom's family for coming along for the presentation, braving this horrible cold weather, and coming into this what should have been a nice warm room, but tain't. So thank you very much for coming along. Now at that point, I think we're back to Mr. Greg, who is going to take another piece of firewood and show us something beautiful as he made with the last one. So Greg, over to you.
Right. Can you hear me okay? Yep. Now I've got another log. This time I'm not going to cut it in half. I'm going to use it as is. This one, as it happens, has a nice bit of a wider section where two branches have come out. If I was using an ordinary piece of wood, a straightforward log as it were, what I would do is I'd mount it between centers. Where is your view? You're viewing from there. I'd mount it between centers like that. Does that make sense? So that the top would become offset. I'm going to do that with this, but I don't need to do it as much because I've got a nice uneven bit anyway. So I'm going to go about there. Now this is a very easy way of using a nice sort of offset bit of wood. Should do that in the middle, middle-ish. Right. I'm going to use the knockout bar to put the center in. I've worked out where the centers are going to be, and I'm going to knock the center into the piece of wood and then tighten it up. I'm not going to rely on just tightening up from this end, because if I tighten up from this end, in fact, it's slipping. Oh, all I'm doing is putting pressure on the wood, and the wood's going to act as a spring, and very little pressure is getting onto the tailstock, headstock. There, should do. Right. Now, let's hope I can get this slow enough. No, it's the other way slow, isn't it? Which way is slow? That's not slow. No, that'll do. That'll do. No, I'll survive. I'll work on that. Right. I'm going to get the tool rest as close as I physically can. Now, it is quite offset, so do be aware of your knuckles. I'm going to use a bowl gouge again. I could use a roughing gouge, but a bowl gouge would probably be a little easier. And I'm going to take down the left-hand side just to get rid of some of the weight. Yeah. That's why I was knocking it. Don't know if you can see it's slipping slightly on the center. Don't want it to move. Right. Back again. I'm going to try and get rid of as much as I can, slowly, as quickly as possible. The more I can get rid of, the faster I can turn it, faster I can turn the speed up. Again, this is the sort of thing I would do with the sort of log you can't really make an awful lot else with. So I'm being very quiet because I'm concentrating. Not something I'm very good at. Right. Once I can turn the speed up a little bit more, it's easier to get a cut. The slower it goes, the less wood you can take off and the longer it's going to take. So I normally try and speed it up as quickly as I can, slowly as I get it rounder and rounder and rounder. Always turn the lathe off before you move the tool rest. I think I'm going to stop about here. Right, I'm just going to quickly put a chucking spigot in that end. Ooh. I'm going to use a spindle gouge to cut the recess. And once I can get it into a chuck, it'll be a little bit more stable. Right, I'll do. So I've turned it very roughly. I've got a chucking spigot there, and this is my slightly offset bit at the top. I'm going to put the chuck in place. That's your center. Right. Now, that's better. I'm going to keep the center in place for a bit. I may have moved it very slightly. It's not disastrous. I'll replace the center. So I'm just putting a ring center because I've not tightened it up bang in the center. I'm not too worried as long as it's held. And I'm going to put a ring center in there to hold it. That's better. Right. Just check everything's tight. Right. Now it's going a bit faster. I can cut it a bit more easily. I'm going to start shaping the outside of my vessel. Now this is going to be a little bud vase, and inside the bud vase there's going to be a flower. So the top of the vase is the flower in the bud vase. Well, that's the theory.
Oh, it's not like. Right. Starting to get to the point where I want to take that away. I've got this turned down to the solid on the left-hand side. So where the point where my natural edge is going to be, I've got it solid beneath there. And as long as I've got that into the solid point, it's supported and it's going to be relatively even. I'm not going to make this stem yet. I'll do that the very last thing. Right. What time have I got to, by the way? 10 o'clock. The wood is absolutely bone dry. Right. I've got it through to the solid here. What I'm going to do now, what I would do is at this point, I would sand this section here. This is only a demonstration, so I'm not going to do much in the way of sanding. So you'll see it in the raw. So don't criticize me for having something straight off the tool. Okay,
this is where we cross our fingers. You good at cricket? Ooh, didn't go flying. Right. I'm going to take tailstock out of the way. Right. Now, again, as I said earlier, you want to be very, very aware that the side of the tool rest here is safe. That side is not. And try and keep your fingers well and truly clear. I'm going to do a little bit of turning by hand to begin with, and then I'm going to drill a hole. If it turns on, I'll do. Now, I've got the beginning of it round, and I'm going to drill the center out, and I've got the tool rest slightly below the center, so that when the drill bit, when the spindle gouge is in the hole, it's going to be off the tool rest. I'm going to turn the speed down a little, but not hugely, so it's doing 22, doing about 800 revs. So I'm going to find the center. This is just a straightforward spindle gouge with swept back grind, as most people have their spindle gouges. I'm going to cut towards the center. And when it gets to the center, I'm bringing my handle round and keep going in. Keep going in. Nope, missed. I'm now not on the tool rest at all, and it's going straight in towards the middle of the piece of wood. I'm going to draw it out. Don't touch that tip now, by the way. It will be warm. I'm doing the same again to feed it in. Get an idea. It's now off the tool rest. You can only drill about an inch at a time because you're only going to get about an inch worth of shavings in there. You could get a drill bit, but I reckon this is quicker. Now, this particular bud vase is going to have a 3/8 of an inch hole. There's 3/8 gouge. It's nearly all the way through. That's about as far as I can go. Actually, no, it's not. I'm going to do something which, be a little bit careful if you do this. I'm taking the tool rest down a bit so I can get it in deeper. There's no support from the tool rest at all. It's just so I can get it in and up to the level. Now, when I take it out, I'm holding it back on the tool rest. I'm not letting the blade engage. Okay, so I now have a hole in my vase. Be very careful, that's going to be warm. Pardon? Well, you still burn yourself. Right. I'm going back to my bowl gouge. I'm going to turn the speed up a bit. But I don't need to worry about the middle so much now, because there is no middle. Now, do bear in mind, I am cutting against the grain. So I'm not taking big cuts. If you take big cuts at this sort of point, you're likely to have the whole piece of wood fighting against you, and it's going to knock it out of the chuck. So be very aware that you are cutting against the grain, so you're taking as little cut as possible, and also use a sharp gouge. So that was a diamond I was using just to take the top off because the stone was a bit clogged. It's steel from me grinding previously. Oops. I've very slightly knocked it out. Badly out. That's not too bad. I'm taking slightly too much, but I'm trying to do this as fast as I can. But if you take too much wood at a time, because you're cutting against the grain, there's a chance you'd be knocking it off the center. So best to take little by little by little by little. And don't let anybody fool you that although yew is a softwood, it's not soft. It can be very hard and brittle. I want this nice and thin, so it's going to take me a minute. Have a look. Have I got that level? Oops. It's only a bowl gouge, don't worry. I wasn't going to use it. Pardon?
Now I need a little bit closer. Now, there's a little bit of a knot here, which is what it's resisting against very slightly, which is why I'm being a little bit cautious. I might bring the tail, so I'm getting a lot of resistance. Oh, I'm nearly there, nearly there. I want to try and keep the bark on, and I want this wall thickness to be absolutely even all the way around. The more even it is, the better it will look. I obviously didn't pick an easy bit of wood. I'm going to move the tool rest in a fraction closer. And this is what's going to be my flower at the top of my bud vase. Now, you may notice I keep wiping the surface down here. I'm doing that because I'm actually looking directly down through the silhouette so I can see what the shape is as I cut it and how thick it is. There we go. Starting to get thinner. sometimes call these trumpet vases. I'm trying to get that sort of trumpet shape. A little bit further. I want this nice and even. Ooh. Do I dare leave it that thick? Oh, still too thick. What I'm having trouble with is there's a little knot. I don't know if you can see there, and that's vibrating very slightly on the tool. I'll try one more. That's it. I think that will do. That's even-ish. I'd like it to be a bit thinner, but you don't want to be here all night. Right, I'm bringing the tool rest around as close as I dare. And I'm going to start going in towards the middle. Now, there is going to come a point where my bowl gouge is going to fall off the end of the tool rest. So I'm going to go on to the spindle gouge, get that last little bit. Right, I think that'll do. Okay, so that's, I might be able to get a little bit closer.
little bit further around. Oops. Don't want to say oops too often. That'll do. Right. So that's the inside of my hollow. So I'm going to get the rest of this side down. What I would do at this stage, if I was taking this to a finish, is I'd now sand the inside section there. Just to show you, when you sand that inner section in the middle, here's a piece of paper, if you don't support yourself, there's an awful lot of spinning wood to catch yourself on. Now, obviously, all of this section in here, I would sand under power with the drill just to get it into there without it spinning. Inner section, I would sand with it moving. Now, be very careful. The wood's going around this way. You want to be aware that the paper will wrap around your finger. If you have it that way and it wraps around, you get your finger stuck in there and it tends to take it off at the knuckle, which you want to try and avoid. So make sure you've got it in a way that that will wrap round and won't catch your finger. So you can go right the way in. Can you see how it's wrapping around? As long as it wraps around that way, I'm okay. But if it wraps around the other way, it's likely to be my finger that's going to get the damage. Now, I'm not going to sand this just purely and simply because we don't have time and you don't want to see me sanding for hours upon end. Right. So assuming that was completely sanded, I'm going to take the tool rest in fairly close there. Now, we know we've got a 3/8 of an inch thick hole down the middle. We're going to have at least 3 or 4 inches of, well, probably 2 inches of stem, 3/8 of an inch thick, plus the wall thickness, so maybe 1/2 an inch thick. If you go too thin, it'll fall apart. Now, you can only work on a little bit at the end each time, because as soon as you've got the right-hand side of thickness, if you start working further right of that, it's going to flex. So we're doing little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit. I'm going to take it in sections. And I'm going to leave this large lump on the left-hand side as long as possible. Now, I want to know how thick that is. I'm not going to go and feel it. I'm going to stop it first and be very careful to feel. It's a bit thicker than I want. So I know I can get it thinner. Now, this is a 3/8 bowl gouge, and that is 1/2 an inch. So as long as I'd get it no thinner than that, we should be all right. So I can just take a quick check with the gouge in my hand, and I can see the thickness I'm aiming for. I'm just going to take one more check with my fingers. Now I've got plenty of space. It's a bit chunky.
I'm being very careful to only cut from the right to the left towards the chuck. If I cut towards the chuck, it's supported. If I cut away from the chuck, it's not really very supported. So my finishing cuts are always going towards the chuck. This is where you want to be slightly aware the end is going to start wibbling out a bit. Now, if I were to start working on the section here, I wouldn't be able to get a cut because it would vibrate too much. There's too much flex. There'd be too much. Can you see how much flex there is in that? If I were to put pressure on that as a cut, it would start to flex. Oh, a little bit further, I think. Now, I need a certain amount of weight at this piece on the bottom, on the left-hand side, which is going to be the base of the vase. I don't want to make it too thin because it's got to support the weight of the flower at the top. And I can just see that is flexing quite a lot. That's right. Don't want to flex too much. There we go. Right. I'm now going to get the passing cut in. I'm going to use my personal favorite spindle gouge, passing tool, which is literally just, I'll pass you these two around. Can you see how that's half? And this is actually half a hacksaw blade. But it's going to give me the smallest amount of cut I can get away with. I'm just removing a certain amount of wood so I can get the gouge in. Now, there does come a point where physically the bowl gouge no longer functions because it doesn't fit, because the wing isn't swept back far enough. So I'm going to use my swept back spindle gouge. Just get this last little bit. Now, at this point, I would sand the whole of the outside, because if you don't sand now, you're not going to be able to sand it at all. It'll start falling apart. I'm going to slow it down again, because it's getting quite thin. I don't want it to fly everywhere. So I'm oh, and there's a tiny little stub at the bottom. Find a skew chisel somewhere. I'll nip off with a skew. I'll just take that. I'm only doing it very lightly. I'll probably do a better job. But there we have. Where's best to put it for the camera? Up on here? One little bud vase with flower. Any questions? I've bored you rigid. The center, you mean? Not on the pith. Absolutely. No, I would make sure the center. I don't know if you can see on this one. Can you see the bottom? There's two centers. There's two piths, two centers. There's one there, and there's one there. I would never make the center of the piece of wood, because then it would inevitably it would go off. It wouldn't cut very cleanly. It would, the gouge would try and find that center. Pardon? No, it's dry. It's bone dry. Absolutely bone dry. Well, it's saying 8.2%. So I don't think that's going to move at all. No, because it'll move. It'll move. If you do it while it's wet, it'll move as you're working it, and it'll start flexing. I have tried it with wet wood, and it really doesn't work. If you dry logs, I'd really only up to about 3 inches. And you dry them in lengths and seal them and leave them for 2 or 3 years. If they're winter felled, the chances are yew, laburnum, things like that won't crack. If they're summer felled, there's a chance they'll crack. And the longer the length you have before you dry it, the more chance the bit in the middle won't crack. But if you've got too big a log, you can't avoid it. But this isn't cracked. This is absolutely bone dry. Probably about 3 or 4 years since it was felled. Any other questions? I've bored you rigid.
Greg, thank you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
For an excellent demonstration of the two pieces. They were well peppered with the safety advice, particularly about making sure you got your fingers on the tailstock side of the tool rest. Otherwise, you finish up painting the wood red, which is it's not ideal.
It would be okay if it stayed red, but it
Yeah.
goes a manky brown. So
That's right. You get manky brown and smelly. But anyway, Greg, thank you very much. It is thought-provoking. I don't know whether Paul Nesbitt is on. We'll be having conversation with Paul because one of the
Yes,
things
I'm
that I
here,
need to
sorry.
set for the chairman's challenge is something from tonight.
I think that if any member could turn either one of these, it would be lovely to see. So I think perhaps we'll let the members decide, I think, on this one, because either piece is challenging in its own way. I think it's been a very thought-provoking demonstration. So, Greg, thank you very much. You've never failed to amaze me with what you turn. Well done, well done. I think that the members should decide what they want to turn on this one.
So there you have it. You've got a choice of the thin bowl with the wings, or the winged
Paul,
flower
Yes.
vase.
add but carefully.
Oh yes, sorry, but I've just been reminded to say add but carefully.
We do not want to have a session such as I witnessed when I was over in the States. They started each meeting with a safety moment and a stupid moment. So please do not bring any stupid moments along to the next meeting. Oh, with that, thank you very much for the 50-odd people who were in the room tonight, who braved not just the cold outside, but inside here, it is freezing.
And the 25 of us here.
How many was it?
In the
there,
warm.
Jenny?
25.
So, Greg, that was a really good turnout for tonight. I don't know what to find out, John. We're still going to find out what we've got to do with the chairs tonight. A few staying behind to help doing the cleanup. But for everybody, please, as I suspect outside, it is already below freezing, so please drive home safely. So thank you very much for a good evening, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you.